Hello and welcome to National Park Wild. I'm Eric, and I just came back from a trip to Yellowstone National Park and Grand Teton National Park, both in Wyoming. These parks are among my favorite places in the US, certainly both top 10 national parks in the country, but Yellowstone is actually my #1 favorite national park. This likely isn't an unpopular view. I imagine many would call Yellowstone their favorite. The park's reputation precedes it. It's definitely one of, if not the most famous US national parks, not only among Americans, but international travelers as well. The park is therefore very popular, receiving 4.7 million visitors in 2024. Grand Teton is popular too, but clearly less so. Its annual visitation last year was 3.6 million visitors, a full million less than Yellowstone, despite the park being literally a 15-minute drive from Yellowstone's south entrance. It makes sense that Yellowstone is more popular, mainly due to how famous it is, and I believe its fame is well earned, but Grand Teton is absolutely worth visiting as well. In this video, I'm going to highlight 5 reasons a trip to Grand Teton can be just as good, if not better, than Yellowstone. One caveat is that most of these reasons are based on things that vary from visit to visit. You may have a worse time at Grand Teton than I did, but you may also have a way better one. And the same goes for Yellowstone and all other travel destinations. Honestly, Grand Teton National Park would be worth visiting on its own, even if Yellowstone wasn't there. So I want to give some compliments to this park that's a little underappreciated by the masses. Hopefully, you'll consider adding Grand Teton to your Yellowstone trip itinerary by the time you finish this video. Let's get into the first reason why a trip to Grand Teton can be even better than Yellowstone: the solitude. As I said at the start, Yellowstone is very famous and popular. This naturally means that there can be a lot of people in the park at one time. As I've seen time and time again at Yellowstone, there are plenty of areas with few to no crowds. It can depend on the time of day and time of year, but I've had very quiet hikes on my last 2 visits to Yellowstone. However, there are also areas where there are almost guaranteed to be crowds. These areas include Mammoth Hot Springs, Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and the geyser basins, especially the Upper Geyser Basin, which is home to the famous Old Faithful. In peak season, it is not uncommon for there to be well over 1,000 people watching Old Faithful at one time. There are ways to plan around the crowds at Yellowstone, as I alluded to, such as exploring the less well-known areas or doing things in the earlier and later hours of the day. But crowds are nonetheless a major dampener in the Yellowstone experience for many people. I hear this complaint far less frequently in regards to Grand Teton, and my experiences at that park have felt very different from Yellowstone. Even ignoring the fact that Grand Teton's most popular areas are almost never as busy as Yellowstone's, I had so many moments where I felt like my party was the only one in the park. For example, I did the Phelps Lake Trail at Grand Teton and only ran into 2 other people at the very start of the trail. Otherwise, it was just my group and the sounds of nature. Mind you, I had similar experiences on Yellowstone trails as well, but Grand Teton's beautiful quiet nature extends even to the main scenic drive. I recall being the only person at select pullouts overlooking the beautiful Teton Mountains, and not hearing a single other car drive by the entire time I was at that pullout. It's unlikely you'll go an entire trip without seeing people, of course, and the crowds do vary day by day and even hour by hour, but in general, if finding solitude is one of your main goals in a national park, Grand Teton is the better park overall. Either way, both parks offer similar opportunities to escape the crowds through hiking, which brings us to the second reason Grand Teton is just as worth visiting as Yellowstone. That is hiking. Yellowstone certainly has Grand Teton beat when it comes to the accessible boardwalk strolls, thanks to its many geyser basins. However, one who enjoys hiking through the wilderness might give Grand Teton the edge as a place for hiking. Don't get me wrong, Yellowstone has tons of awesome hikes. My experiences on Lone Star Geyser, Point Sublime, and Specimen Ridge were all particularly wonderful. That said, I don't think there's a single trail in Yellowstone that gets the same renown amongst hikers as Grand Teton's Cascade Canyon. This hike takes you into a glacially carved canyon within the Teton Range, and there are so many ways to explore this area on foot. I have yet to hike past Inspiration Point on this trail network, and it's still among my favorites in the park system. The first section with Inspiration Point takes you around Jenny Lake, where I happened to see a moose, and ends with a beautiful waterfall and a moderate climb to the point itself, overlooking Jenny Lake. This view is beautiful, but it only scratches the surface of what you can see on this trail. If you enter Cascade Canyon, you hike into the mountains, constantly getting beautiful views of them as well as the surrounding glaciers, forests, and creeks. If you go far enough along the trail, you will reach the stellar Lake Solitude, and after that, you can either return to Jenny Lake via the trail you took into the canyon, or you can complete the Cascade Canyon Paintbrush Loop, which takes you through another gorgeous canyon, that being Paintbrush Canyon. Better yet, the beautiful and more often visited Lee Lake and String Lake can be accessed from Paintbrush Canyon as well. All of the trails in the Jenny Lake area, including Cascade Canyon, are connected, making this possibly the best network of trails in the entire national park system. While it's hard to know what the prevailing opinion is, it's clear that many consider this trail network to be among the best in any park. A list of the top 25 trails in any Park Service property by the National Park Foundation listed Hidden Falls as one of the best. And the book Your Guide to the National Parks by Michael Joseph Oswald lists Cascade Canyon as one of his favorite hikes. With the exception of Oswald's first edition, which does list Mount Washburn, none of these lists feature a Yellowstone hike as one of the best. Mount Washburn is no doubt a beloved hike, but Cascade Canyon is very likely the most sought-after hiking trail in either Wyoming National Park. I want to experience it myself in its entirety someday, so I certainly have a reason to go back to Grand Teton, and if you like hiking, you have a reason to go as well. The third thing Grand Teton may have over Yellowstone is its centerpiece. Yellowstone is enormous, having an acreage 7 times larger than Grand Teton, so it's no surprise that Yellowstone has a greater quantity of natural attractions. Old Faithful is the most famous, but places like Mammoth Hot Springs, Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, Grand Prismatic Spring, Lamar Valley, Hayden Valley, Yellowstone Lake, and Tower Fall are also major draws which are spread around the entire park. There are also countless pullouts frankly, and there's small drives around the road for the smaller sites, things like Sheep Eater Cliff, Gibbon Falls, and Firehole Canyon. Grand Teton can't compete with this amount of attractions. Even taking only the most famous sites, Yellowstone still has at least half a dozen major things, while Grand Teton really just has the Tetons. This might seem to make Grand Teton less worth visiting, but quantity of attractions is not the only factor in a national park. The quality is important too, and I think the Tetons themselves might be a more beautiful sight than any individual thing in Yellowstone. I'm sure there are plenty of people who consider the Tetons far superior to any geyser basin or canyon at Yellowstone. Looking at mountains alone, Yellowstone offers plenty of pretty ones such as Mount Washburn and Electric Peak, but the Yellowstone landscape does not lend itself to the best mountain viewing. Yellowstone has plateaus and canyons galore, altering the elevation throughout the park. If you want mountain views and photos in your next national park visit, Grand Teton is the way to go. The surrounding landscape is mostly 2 tiers of flat sagebrush fields, and the park road is built with the mountain views in mind. There are over a dozen pullouts you can stop at to enjoy views of the mountains, and to list them all and what makes them special would take all day. It's honestly worth stopping at nearly all of them. I did stop at all of them, and have so many wonderful memories to take from each different view I got. Grand Teton National Park is centered around its namesake, and its namesake is one of the finest centerpieces of any national park, maybe finer than anything at Yellowstone. The next reason Grand Teton might offer a better experience than Yellowstone is in relation to water activities. There is one activity in which Yellowstone definitely gets the edge, and that is fishing. Fishing for cutthroat trout is very popular in Yellowstone, and it might be the most famous national park for fishing as a result. Grand Teton's not bad in this regard either, but fishing is not what makes it stand above Yellowstone. It's what you do on the water that makes a difference here. Both parks have opportunities for whitewater rafting just outside of park boundaries. I've personally done a Yellowstone rafting trip, but it is the more leisurely water exploration that makes Grand Teton stand out. At Yellowstone, with the exception of Yellowstone Lake and Lewis Lake, paddling and floating are not allowed anywhere in the massive park. On the other hand, Grand Teton is famous for containing a section of the Snake River which runs in front of the mountains. It is common for visitors to paddle the river or take a guided float trip. I have done 2 float trips at Grand Teton, and they might be my favorite experiences I had in the park. Being carried by the river, cruising along the forest, turning through several forks that eventually come back together, seeing wildlife such as beavers, bald eagles, and migratory birds, and getting some of the best views of the mountains in the whole park, it's all spectacular. Yellowstone doesn't offer any experience quite like this one, so a trip along the Snake River could make a visit to these 2 national parks a more complete trip. I highly recommend it. The final reason Grand Teton is better than Yellowstone is the only one on here that is guaranteed, which perhaps makes it the most important. There's always a chance you'll prefer Yellowstone's hikes, or be more impressed by Yellowstone's sights, or even see less crowds while at Yellowstone. However, no matter what, Grand Teton is always an easier park to manage. I've said throughout the video, Yellowstone is larger and has a lot more going on, which means there is more to do. This on its own technically makes Yellowstone a better park, but that's with the assumption you have time to see it all. One thing I always think about when visiting a park is how much can be done in a day, because even though I've made several trips to national parks, I often don't have much time in each, and that's the case for most people. It's not easy to give up a week to visit 1 or 2 national parks. I'm a firm believer that the amount of time you have in a national park is not as important as what you do with that time, which is why some of my favorite national parks, such as Big Bend in Texas, are ones I only spent a single day at. However, Yellowstone is so expansive that it's one of very few parks I feel is nearly impossible to do in a day and not feel like you missed out on something. The best stuff at Yellowstone is spread around the entire 2.2 million acres, and the Grand Loop Road alone is 142 miles long. That's not even including the several roads branching off from the loop, one of which you have to take as you pass through the entrance. If you have one full day at Yellowstone, we're talking you enter the park before sunrise and leave after sunset, you might be able to stop at every major site. Assuming you start from the north entrance, you can go to Mammoth Hot Springs, stop at Lamar Valley briefly, go to Tower Fall, drive to Canyon to make a stop, drive by Yellowstone Lake, stop at 1 or 2 geyser basins, do a small hike like Artist Paint Pots, and drive back out the north entrance. If you do this, you will spend at least 5 hours driving, possibly much more if you stop for wildlife or get backed up by wildlife. This one-day itinerary would give you a feel for most of the things you can see in the park, and you would certainly have some nice memories of the geothermal features, landscapes, and wildlife, but it would be stressful and not as memorable as a trip where more time is dedicated to each site. You could alternatively do a day trip where you only see the north half or south half of Yellowstone, but these halves are so different from each other. You could go to Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone in either the north or south half, but if you never go north of Canyon, you will miss the best mountain views and wildlife viewing areas, and if you never go south of it, you will miss the most famous and most beautiful geothermal features. A day trip is not the way to go for Yellowstone, and it's not perfect for Grand Teton either, but that park is much more manageable in a short time frame. If you enter Grand Teton from the north entrance, drive the entire loop road, including a turn off to Phelps Lake, and re-exit through the north, you will only spend 3 hours driving. And while missing one half of the loop road would mean missing some different perspectives of the mountains, both parts of the road still offer views of the same centerpiece. So it's not as if you're missing a chance to see a landmark you can only see on other parts of the road, like in Yellowstone. I am not trying to encourage you to intentionally plan to only spend one day at either park if you can help it. But if you are short on time, Grand Teton is the easier park to conquer. 2 days there is enough time to drive much of the park, do a major hike in that Cascade Canyon area, spend time on the Snake River, and still take some breathers to enjoy the scenery. Ideally, we can all spend a week in each park, but that's not usually feasible. So if you only have 1 to 2 days in Wyoming, or have an extra 1 to 2 days on your Yellowstone itinerary, Grand Teton is absolutely worth that time. Overall, Yellowstone is still my favorite national park, primarily because of how much there is to see and do. But there are certain activities and itineraries that are better at Grand Teton and are sometimes only possible there. I highly recommend visiting both parks if you can. Yellowstone is certainly more famous, and that will remain the case for years to come. But I hope this video taught you a few things about Grand Teton National Park, and that you will consider checking it out on your next trip to Wyoming. Not everyone will prefer Grand Teton, and not everyone will think a trip there is worth it, but the park has plenty to offer that I wanted to make sure more people were aware of. These 2 parks are certainly among the best out there, and a trip to both is, in my opinion, almost unbeatable. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down with your thoughts on both parks and any questions you might have. Subscribe for more national park videos. I'll see you next time.